This simple habit may be dulling the tiny gland people call the third eye, and it could be exactly why your sense of inner knowing feels dimmer than it once did. Listen, there's a quiet erosion happening not in the streets, but in the rhythm of your nights. It is subtle, ordinary, and repeated. It is small enough that most systems that shape our lives never notice it. But in a spiritual register, in certain ancient teachings, the effect of that small, repeated action is described as the slow dimming of something essential, the capacity to remember who you are. Tonight, I will show you a 3-point, body-based way to check for that dimness, explain why scholars and seekers point to what I'll call an interpretive bridge between the third eye and a modern organ called the pineal gland, and offer a simple, symbolic practice you can do this evening to begin to test whether a nightly habit is blunting your inner sight. This is practical, experimental, and explicitly symbolic, not medical certainty. If you suspect real sleep or health problems, consult a qualified healthcare professional. Centuries ago, in a place called Nag Hammadi in Upper Egypt, a set of writings was unearthed that changed how many people think about spiritual knowing. These texts, including what scholars call the Gospel of Philip and other so-called Gnostic writings, present the idea that knowledge of the divine can be verified in the body. They describe marks, signs, and living confirmations anyone could touch and feel as proof of an original connection to a primordial source, sometimes named the monad, or the mon. Those texts were contentious. They threatened systems that relied on intermediaries. For some, that threat was political, for others, doctrinal. History shows these perspectives were suppressed or ignored by mainstream centers of power. Whether you consider those writings orthodox history or an alternative strand of early thought, they matter because they insist knowledge can be embodied and verified directly. The ancient claim is simple and startling. Certain people carry 3 loci of recognition on their bodies, 3 points where the contact with origin leaves a trace. The language varies across sources, but the pattern repeats. An origin point at the base of the skull, a perception point on the lateral hand, between the little finger's root and the wrist, and a command point at the center of the sternum, slightly above the heart. The 3 form a triad: origin, perception, command. A sequence that, in the old framing, maps how a seed of recognition takes root, is sensed, and then is enacted in the world. I want to be clear about what I am and am not saying. I do not present these as objective anatomical guarantees. The Nag Hammadi books are extra-canonical documents. They represent a strand of early spiritual thought, not the settled teaching of any single living tradition. When modern interpreters hear inner eye or third eye, they often point to the pineal gland as a convenient biological metaphor. That mapping is interpretive, speculative, and culturally resonant, not a proven medical equivalence. We will use that bridge carefully as a way to talk about inner clarity, circadian patterns, and how modern habits might blunt our capacity to access subtle, subjective knowledge. Now, before you do anything else, settle your posture. You do not need props. You will not need to ingest anything. Sit or stand comfortably. Begin by placing both feet on the ground, sense the support beneath you, and breathe slowly. In for a count that feels natural, out for the same count. Allow your attention to come inward. This is a simple test. It is experimental. It asks nothing of you that you cannot stop at any moment. First locus, the origin, at the base of the skull. Reach behind your head with both hands and rest your fingertips on the area where your skull meets the top of your neck. Explore that ridge with gentle pressure. Don't press hard. Listen with your touch. What do you notice? Some people report a subtle hollowness, a faint coolness, a slight tenderness, or a barely perceptible hum. Others feel nothing at all. Many report that a memory or image, odd as it sounds, can arise. A flicker of recognition, a scent, a childhood moment, or a sense of being seen. If you feel anything at all, even a small shift in temperature, a tremor of emotion, a tightening or softening, make a mental note. We are learning to translate sensations into evidence, however modest. Second locus, the perception point on the lateral side of your hand. Turn one hand so the pinky side faces up. With the thumb of your opposite hand, trace the soft area between the base of your little finger and your wrist. Move slowly. Many people feel a particular sensitivity there. A prickling, a warmth, a stream of attention flowing outward. Some feel words arise without effort. Others feel a closing or a numbness. The body is telling a story through sensation. This is the place ancient texts name as the seat of perception, the place that affirms the inner eye's noticing. Third locus, the command point at your sternum. Place 2 fingers on the center of your chest, just above the breastbone. Press lightly. Breathe into the pressure. Some discover a quiet expansion under their fingers, a beating note that resonates across the rib cage. Others feel nothing but calm. In the old schema, this is the place where recognition becomes proclamation, where the inner movement is translated into action. Notice any warmth, any widening, any thought that arrives to tell you what to do next. As you move through these points, expect one predictable phenomenon. A quick, internal voice that dismisses what you feel. It may say, "This is all nonsense," or "You imagined it," or "This is placebo." That reflex is not your enemy. It is what the ancient writings called archontic interference, a habit of doubt that stands between you and direct knowing. Name it when it appears. Notice its texture, but do not follow it. Observe it as another sensation. The mere act of noting the dismissal without engaging it weakens its hold. The body, unlike the discursive mind, will not lie the way patterns of thought do. Origin, perception, command. When you slow down and let the body speak, you give yourself a chance to hear what it has stored. If you felt anything during those 3 points, type the word recognition in the comments. That's not a performance. It is a small experiment in shared attention. If you felt nothing, that is also information. Many people need to repeat the practice across several nights to detect a pattern. There is no shame in the absence of immediate sensation. Presence is cultivated, not coerced. Why are we doing this? Because modern life contains a very simple, ubiquitous habit that scholars and contemporary commentators often cite as a likely correlate of a dulled inner sense. Excessive exposure to artificial light at night, particularly the blue rich light emitted by screens. Phones, tablets, laptops, LED televisions. They are tiny, repeated rituals that extend the day well into what our bodies once recognized as night. In physiological terms, scientists discuss melatonin rhythms and circadian entrainment. In experiential spiritual terms, we might say these habits flatten the threshold where subtle knowing arises. The claim is not that screens kill the pineal gland. That would be a medical assertion we cannot make here. But it is reasonable to say cautiously, many observers suggest that chronic nighttime light, irregular sleep, and the stimulation of constant screens can impair the conditions in which inner clarity naturally surfaces. Think of the pineal gland as a cultural symbol for the inner eye. It is a bridge, not an equation. For centuries, mystics across cultures have spoken of an opening that happens when the body rests in darkness and the mind in quiet. That opening is easier to experience when melatonin cycles are undisrupted and when the nervous system can slip into restorative rhythms. Modern life often interrupts that. The screen invites attention outward at the very hour when a different attention needs to settle inward. If you find your nights filled with scrolling, bright notifications, or late-night work under harsh artificial light, consider that you are repeating a small action with outsized spiritual consequences. Again, this is interpretive. It may be a factor that could dull subjective inner clarity. If you want to test this as an experiment, choose one night this week to modify the habit. Turning off screens an hour before bed, shifting to warm, low light in the evening, or wearing blue light blocking settings on devices are simple, non-medical interventions you can try. Think of it as a field test. Does a quieter, darker lead-in to sleep change the texture of what you feel at those 3 loci? Some people report more vivid sensations, clearer dreams, or a softening of the archontic voice. Others notice improved sleep and a calmer mind. Keep in mind, personal reports are not universal proof. They are, however, meaningful data for each individual. We should talk briefly about the language of control that often creeps into these conversations. The Gnostic schema names a demiurge, a secondary creator or architect, and archontes, frequency pattern intelligences said to influence perception. Whether you accept that cosmology literally or see it as metaphor, the story functions as a map for understanding why doubt and distraction are so persistent. Systems, whether institutional, psychological, or technological, often channel our attention outward and away from direct verification. The remedy the texts propose is simple and radical. Test for yourself. Look for the marks. Feel your body. Do not surrender your capacity to know to intermediaries. If you are practicing the 3-point check tonight or over several evenings, expect layers of resistance, fatigue that feels like silence, boredom that masquerades as truth, or an inner chatter declaring the exercise futile. Those are precisely the phenomena the teachings predicted. Name them as archontic reflexes. They are, in a way, evidence. Evidence that the pattern of distraction is working. Your task is to refuse engagement with the reflex. Return to your breath. Return to touch. Origin, perception, command. Now, here is a small interpretive teaching born of the triad. Suppose the base of the skull is the point of origin, the place where you feel the vestige of being touched by something before your life. Suppose the lateral hand organizes how you receive impressions, the way the world enters. Suppose the sternum is where you decide to act from that recognition. If a nightly habit repeatedly stimulates your outward attention, bright screens, alerting notifications, late-night scrolling, then the flow from origin to perception to command is rerouted. The attention that might have turned inward to receive subtle signals is habitually hijacked outward. Over time, the practice of outward stimulation can make the inward way quiet, harder to discern. This is not a moral failing. It is a structural consequence of habits repeated at times, meant for rest. So what to do practically, right now, beyond the 3-point check? First, experiment with a ritual night. In the hour before your typical bedtime, dim your ambient lights, silence non-essential notifications, and choose a single gentle activity. Reading a physical book under warm light, taking a short walk, or sitting with a cup of tea. Notice how your breathing changes. Then, perform the 3 touches again. Keep a simple log. Date, habit change, what you felt at each point. Over 3 to 7 nights, you may start to notice patterns. If you do, that is useful information for your practice. If you do not, that is also a result. Adjust and try again. Remember, these are spiritual experiments, not medical prescriptions. If you experience persistent insomnia, significant mood changes, or suspect underlying sleep disorders, please consult a qualified healthcare professional. Do not use this practice as a substitute for medical advice or treatment. This work is about cultivating attention, not diagnosing. Now for the activation, a brief symbolic declaration rooted in the old cadence of recognition, translated simply into 3 lines. This is not a magic formula. It is a communal statement you make to your own body and attention. Say it aloud once, with intention, while pressing each of the 3 points in order. Base of skull, lateral hand, sternum. Place your fingers again at the base of your skull. Speak the first line. I remember origin. Move to the lateral hand and speak the second line. I open sight. Finish on the sternum and speak the third line. I declare voice. Say these lines slowly. Feel the syllables reverberate in different parts of your chest and throat. Allow a beat between each line. You may feel nothing at all. You may feel something subtle. Both are valid. The purpose is to mark the experiment with an embodied vow, a soft signal to your nervous system that you are intentionally redirecting attention inward. If you felt any sensation during the earlier touch or now, leave the word recognition in the comments. This is our low-friction way of gauging whether shared attention produces shared evidence. You can come back to this practice nightly or periodically. Over time, you may notice the archontic reflex weaken. The immediate dismissal may no longer have the same force. Curiosity replaces curt denial. Small sensations bloom into consistent impressions. We should anticipate skepticism. Some will say this is placebo. Others will insist these are fanciful interpretations of ordinary physiology. Those responses are not only reasonable, they are healthy. The measure of any spiritual claim is whether you can verify it directly for yourself. That is why these texts emphasize anamnesis, the remembering of what was once known. Anamnesis is not handed down as doctrine, it is recovered in lived embodied verification. To tie a bow around this, the triangular sequence origin, perception, command is a practical tool. The pineal gland is a modern cultural metaphor for the inner eye, useful for connecting ancient symbolism to contemporary experience, but it is not a one-to-one medical claim. The simple, ubiquitous habit we named, late-night screen exposure and artificial light, is presented as a plausible correlate that could blunt inner clarity by altering the conditions in which quiet knowing arises. Try the experiment. Perform the 3-point check, alter your evening light and screen habits, and observe. Keep records. Judge by your own embodied results. If you are ready for deeper practice, subscribe. We will explore further non-medical exercises for cultivating attention, guided dream recall, structured quieting practices, and historical context for these extra-canonical texts in future videos. Share this with someone who feels their inner clarity is thinning. It may be the small, ordinary habit that is doing the work, and sometimes a gentle change of rhythm is all it takes to begin to notice again. Finally, a reminder. If you experience troubling sleep problems, ongoing fatigue, or suspect a physical condition, consult a qualified healthcare professional. This practice is symbolic and exploratory, meant to cultivate attention and curiosity, not to replace medical counsel. Origin, perception, command. Name the archontic reflex when it arises, press the 3 points, speak the short declaration, and watch what changes over the coming nights. The path back to recognition is rarely dramatic. It arrives in repetitions, an evening of darkened light, a touch that tells a story, a small sentence spoken with intention. Keep the experiment simple, keep your curiosity alive, and let the body, that faithful truth-teller, do the work of revealing what the mind alone cannot.